Staff Sergeant Maria Gonzalez pressed her eye to the scope and swept the valley below. The morning sun painted the Arizona desert in shades of gold and rust. From her position on Devil's Ridge, she could see everything. The small town of Copper. Falls nestled in the valley, the main road cutting through like a dusty ribbon, and the training grounds where her unit should have been running drills. But they weren't. Maria lowered her rifle and checked her watch. 8:30 a.m. The exercise should have started 30 minutes ago. Through her binoculars, she spotted the convoy of military vehicles parked at the base camp. Tiny figures moved around them, her fellow soldiers from the 142nd Infantry Division. She keyed her radio. "Base, this is Ridge Watch. I'm in position and ready. Where's the convoy?" Static crackled back. Then Sergeant Cole's voice, thick with barely hidden amusement. "Oh, right, the spotter. We forgot about you up there, Gonzalez. Just keep watching. Let us know if you see anything important." The radio went quiet. Maria stared at it, then at the scene below. Forgot about her? This was a coordinated training exercise. She was the designated marksman, positioned to provide overwatch and intelligence. How do you forget the eyes of the operation? But she knew how. She'd known for the past 6 months, ever since she'd been transferred to Fort Brennan. The 142nd was an old boys' club. They tolerated her presence because they had to, but they never let her forget she didn't belong. Colonel Harrison had made that clear during her first briefing. "We do things differently here, Sergeant. This isn't some mixed unit where everyone gets a participation trophy. You'll need to prove yourself every single day." Maria had served 2 tours in Afghanistan. She'd earned her expert marksman badge and saved more lives than she could count. But here, in this desert outpost 50 miles from nowhere, she was just the woman who'd disrupted their comfortable routine. She settled back into position and continued her watch. Professional to the core, even when her own unit treated her like an afterthought. Down in the valley, she could see the soldiers gathering around someone, probably Lieutenant Davis giving the mission briefing. The exercise was supposed to simulate a hostage rescue in an urban environment. Copper Falls would play the role of a hostile town, with civilian actors playing the parts of both hostages and insurgents. Maria knew the plan by heart. She'd studied it for weeks, memorized every building, every alley, every possible line of sight. The convoy would approach from the east, establish a perimeter, and then send in 2 squads to secure the target building, the old Copper Falls Bank on Main Street. Her job was simple: watch, report, and if necessary, provide precision fire. Support. She was their guardian angel, perched high above the action. If they remembered she existed. Through her scope, she watched the convoy finally start moving. 8 vehicles in formation, carrying 24 soldiers. Maria felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came before every operation, even training exercises. Lives depended on doing things right. She keyed her radio again. "Base, this is Ridge Watch. Convoy is moving. ETA to target zone is 15 minutes. "Copy that, Ridge Watch," came a different voice. Corporal Jensen. At least he was professional. "Maintain overwatch and report any irregularities." "Roger." Maria swept her scope across Copper Falls again. Population 847 according to the welcome sign. Most folks had been evacuated for the exercise, but a few holdouts remained in their homes on the outskirts of town. The mayor had insisted the training would bring in federal money and help the local economy. From what Maria could see, Copper Falls needed all the help it could get. Main Street was lined with buildings that had seen better days. The bank sat, squat and solid in the middle of the block, its 1920s architecture still impressive despite the peeling paint and boarded windows. Perfect for urban warfare training. The convoy reached the edge of town and stopped. Maria watched through her scope as soldiers dismounted and took positions. Everything looked normal. Textbook deployment. Then she saw something that made her heart skip. A glint of metal from the water tower about 400 yards east of the bank. She adjusted her scope and focused. There, a rifle barrel poking through the tower's maintenance platform. That wasn't part of the exercise. Maria grabbed her radio. "Base, this is Ridgewatch. I have visual on an unknown sniper position. Water tower, east side of target zone. This is not part of the exercise roster." Silence. "Base, do you copy? Unknown sniper at the water tower." Static, then Sergeant Cole's voice dripping with irritation. "Ridgewatch, quit playing games. There's no sniper in the tower. You're seeing things." "Negative, Base. I have clear visual on a rifle barrel and at least one individual. This is a real threat." "Gonzalez, you're disrupting the exercise with false reports. Maintain radio silence unless you have actual intelligence to report." Maria stared at her radio in disbelief. False reports? She'd been doing this job for 8 years. She knew the difference between shadows and rifle barrels, between civilians and combatants. She looked through her scope again. The figure in the water tower had shifted position. Now she could see more clearly. Military fatigues, but not U.S. Army. The wrong color, the wrong cut, and the rifle was definitely not standard issue. Her training kicked in. Real threat, unresponsive. "Command!" She had to act. Maria keyed her radio one more time. "All units, this is Ridgewatch. We have hostile forces in the area. Unknown sniper in the water tower is targeting our position. I repeat, this is not a drill." "Ridgewatch, stand down immediately," Cole's voice barked back. "You are hereby ordered to maintain radio silence. Any further disruption will result in disciplinary action." They were cutting her out. In the middle of what might be a real combat situation, her own unit was silencing her because they thought she was crying wolf. Maria watched helplessly as the soldiers below continued their exercise, completely unaware of the danger. The convoy had reached the bank. Soldiers were establishing their perimeter, moving in predetermined patterns that anyone watching from above could easily predict, including the sniper in the water tower. She could see him more clearly now. Not just one man, 2 of them. They had the high ground and clear sight lines to the entire operational area. If they opened fire, her fellow soldiers would be sitting ducks. Maria made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. She could follow orders and watch her unit walk into an ambush, or she could trust her training and her eyes. She chose trust. Settling into her firing position, Maria chambered around and acquired her target. 800 yards, slight crosswind. From the southwest, target partially concealed behind steel supports. It was going to be the most important shot of her career, and nobody below even knew she was about to take it. In the distance, she could hear the faint sound of helicopters. That wasn't part of the exercise either. Maria's blood ran cold as she realized this wasn't just a random attack. Someone had been watching them, learning their patterns, their procedures, their weaknesses. And right now, the biggest weakness was that nobody would listen to the woman on the ridge. The first shot rang out from the water tower. The sun climbed higher, turning Maria's rocky perch into a furnace. Sweat stung her eyes as she tracked another target through her scope, a mercenary trying to flank her unit's withdrawal route. She squeezed the trigger and watched him drop. 27 rounds left. Down in the valley, her unit was making progress toward the defensive positions in the foothills. But they were still exposed, still vulnerable. Every shot Maria took bought them precious seconds and yards of ground. Her radio crackled. "Ridgewatch, this is Williams. We're taking fire from that blue house on Elm Street. Can you see it?" Maria swept her scope across the town until she found the house. Second-story window, muzzle flashes. She adjusted for distance and wind, then sent 2 quick shots through the window. The firing stopped. Blue house neutralized. "Thanks, Ridgewatch. You're saving our lives up there." Strange how it took a real battle for them to remember her value. Another group of mercenaries was trying to move through the alley behind the hardware store. Maria shifted position slightly and waited. When they emerged into the street, she was ready. 3 shots, 3 targets down. The rest scattered back into cover. But the return fire was getting more accurate. The mercenaries had figured out her approximate position and were concentrating their efforts. Bullets whined overhead constantly now, forcing her to keep moving between shots. Her radio buzzed with an encrypted frequency. Fort Brennan Command. Ridge Watch. This is Colonel Martinez, Fort Brennan. What's your tactical assessment? Maria had never spoken directly to a full colonel before, but there was no time for protocol. Sir, we're facing approximately 25 to 30 hostile combatants with military training and equipment. They knew our exercise schedule and deployment patterns. This was a planned ambush. Understood. Can you identify their equipment and capabilities? Mixed small arms, mostly rifle caliber. Some crew-served weapons. I count at least 2 light. Machine guns. No heavy weapons observed. They're using civilian vehicles but moving like trained soldiers. Air support is en route. Can your unit hold position? Maria looked down at her fellow soldiers, still exposed on the hillside. Morrison was barely conscious, being half-carried by 2 men. Jensen was pale but still moving. Everyone else looked exhausted and low on ammunition. Sir, my unit is conducting a fighting withdrawal to defensive positions. I'm providing overwatch from Devil's Ridge, but I'm taking concentrated fire and running low on ammunition. How low? Maria checked her remaining rounds. 24 rounds. Sir. A pause. Ridge Watch. Air support ETA is 12 minutes. Can you maintain overwatch that long? 12 minutes. With 24 rounds and half the remaining mercenaries now shooting at her position. I'll do my best, sir. Negative, Sergeant. I need a tactical assessment. Can you or can't you? Maria watched another group of mercenaries positioning to attack her unit's flank. She put 2 rounds into their cover, forcing them back. 22. Rounds left. Sir, I can hold this position and maintain overwatch. But I need immediate resupply or extraction after air support arrives. Understood. Ridgewatch, you are authorized to take any action necessary to protect your unit. Rules of engagement are weapons free. Weapons free. No more questions about authorization or proper procedures. Just stop the bad guys by any means necessary. Copy that, sir. Weapons free. Maria settled into her rhythm again. Breathe, aim, squeeze, assess. Move to next target. The mercenaries were getting frustrated, making mistakes. They'd expected to overwhelm a surprise training unit, not fight a running battle against prepared defenders. Through her scope, she watched Lieutenant Davis organizing the final phase of the withdrawal. Her unit was almost to safety, just another. 200 yards to the rocky outcropping that would give them cover and good defensive positions, but the mercenaries saw it too. If they were going to stop the soldiers, it had to be now. A coordinated assault began from 3 directions. The largest group, maybe 10 men, rushed straight up the hillside toward her unit. Another group tried to flank from the north. While a third moved to cut off the retreat route, Maria had to make a choice. She couldn't engage all 3 groups effectively. Which threat was most dangerous? The flanking group from the north would hit her unit first. She swung her rifle toward them and began engaging targets as fast as she could acquire them. 1, 2, 3 down. The rest took cover, but their advance was stopped. The group cutting off the retreat route was smaller, but in a critical position. Maria shifted her aim and dropped 2 of them with quick shots. The survivors fell back. That left the main assault group charging straight up the hill at her fellow soldiers. 10 mercenaries against 8 exhausted soldiers, 2 of them wounded. Maria turned her rifle on the assault group and began the most intensive shooting of her career. She didn't have time to be surgical about it. She just had to stop them. Her rifle cracked repeatedly. 4 shots, 3 hits. The charge faltered as men dove for cover, but they were still advancing, using rocks and scrub brush for concealment. 15 rounds left. Ridge Watch, we're almost to cover, Lieutenant Davis reported. Can you suppress the assault group for another 60 seconds? Roger. 60 seconds. Maria could do a lot in 60 seconds if her ammunition held out. She methodically worked the assault group, not trying for perfect shots, but focusing on suppression. Force them to keep their heads down, disrupt their coordination. Buy time. Bullets sparked off the rock next to her face, sending stone fragments into her cheek. Another punched through her sleeve without hitting flesh. The mercenaries were getting closer to her position, too. 30 seconds, Ridge Watch. Maria's bolt locked back on an empty chamber. She reloaded her last magazine. 8 rounds. 8 rounds to hold 3 separate groups of mercenaries for 30 seconds. She picked her targets carefully now. The assault group leader coordinating the charge. The machine gunner who'd been laying down suppressive fire. The mercenary with the radio, probably calling for reinforcements. 3 shots, 3 critical targets eliminated. "We're in cover," Davis announced. "Ridge Watch, fall back to secondary position." Fall back. Maria looked at her tactical situation. The mercenaries were maybe 100 yards from her position now, moving through the rocks with fire and maneuver. Tactics. Her escape route led down the back side of the ridge to a narrow canyon. If she left now, she might make it to safety before they overran her position. But something on the radio made her hesitate. Additional contacts from the east. More vehicles. Estimate 15 additional hostiles. Reinforcements. The mercenaries had backup coming, and her unit was still vulnerable even in their defensive positions. Maria made a decision that surprised even her. Instead of falling back, she moved to a better fighting position on the ridge and prepared to make her last stand. 5 rounds left in her rifle, maybe 20 minutes until air support arrived. An unknown number of mercenaries closing on her position. The math didn't work in her favor, but math had never been her strongest subject anyway. She keyed her radio one last time before the final phase of the battle. "All units, this is Ridge Watch. I am remaining in overwatch position to provide continued support. If these guys get past me, they'll have clear shots at your defensive position." "Ridge Watch, that's a negative. Fall back immediately. That's an order." "Sir, with respect, somebody needs to cover the high ground. If I leave, they'll put snipers up here and pick you apart." Silence on the radio. Everyone understood the tactical reality. Someone had to hold the ridge, and Maria was the only one in position to do it. Lieutenant Davis's voice came back, quieter now. "Ridge Watch." "Maria, thank you." "Just doing my job, sir." But it was more than that. And they all knew it. She was doing her job for people who had spent months making her feel unwelcome, unwanted, inadequate. She was about to risk everything for soldiers who had forgotten she existed. That's what real soldiers did. The first mercenary appeared among the rocks 50 yards below her position. Maria centered her crosshairs and waited for a clean shot. 4 rounds left, and the final act was about to begin. The desert wind picked up, carrying the smell of gunpowder and dust. Maria wiped sweat from her eyes and focused on the approaching figures. They moved like professionals, one providing cover while another advanced, using every piece of available concealment. But Maria had the high ground and knew every rock on Devil's Ridge. She'd been studying this terrain for weeks, memorizing sight lines and fields of fire for the training exercise that had gone so wrong. The lead mercenary broke cover to rush the next position. Maria led him by a few inches and squeezed the trigger. He stumbled and fell, sliding down the rocky slope. 3 rounds left. The others took cover immediately, but Maria had seen enough to count them. 5 men in this assault group, with more voices on their radios calling for backup. They knew she was almost out of ammunition. They just had to wait her out or overwhelm her position. Her radio crackled with updates from below. "Ridge Watch. We have visual on the eastern reinforcements. Estimated 15 hostiles and 3 vehicles. Air support ETA 8 minutes, came the voice of Colonel Martinez from Fort Brennan. All units maintain positions. 8 minutes. Maria looked at her. Remaining ammunition and did the math. 3 rounds wouldn't last 8 minutes against multiple assault groups. But maybe she didn't need to win. Maybe she just needed to hold long enough for help to arrive. Movement in the rocks below caught her attention. 2 mercenaries were trying to flank her position, moving through a gully that would bring them to her left side. Maria shifted her rifle and waited. When the first man's head appeared above the rocks, she was ready. 1 shot at 40 yards. He dropped and didn't move. 2 rounds left, but now they knew exactly where she was. Automatic weapons fire erupted from multiple positions, forcing Maria to hug the ground as bullets whined overhead. Rock fragments showered down on her as rounds shattered stone all around her hiding spot. She rolled to a new position just as a grenade exploded where she'd been lying. They were serious about taking out the sniper who'd been disrupting their operation. Through the smoke and dust, Maria saw them rushing her position, at least 4 men coming from different angles. Too many targets, not enough ammunition. She picked the closest threat and fired. The mercenary spun and fell, but the others kept coming. 1 round left, Maria worked the bolt and chambered her last cartridge. 40 yards away, a mercenary with an assault rifle was climbing toward her position. Behind him, 2 more were advancing. Below them, she could see the eastern reinforcements taking positions around the town. 1 bullet. Multiple targets. Impossible odds. Maria aimed at the closest threat and took her final shot. The mercenary went down, but his partners were still climbing toward her. She grabbed her sidearm, a 9mm pistol with 15 rounds. Not ideal for long range. Work, but better than harsh language. The first mercenary crested the ridge 20 feet away, assault rifle swinging toward her position. Maria put 3 pistol rounds center mass and watched him fall backward down the slope. But the others were close now, too close. A burst of automatic fire chewed up the rocks around her. Maria rolled behind a boulder and tried to assess her situation. Multiple hostiles within pistol range, more approaching from below, reinforcements moving to attack her unit's position. The math definitely didn't work in her favor. But then she heard something beautiful. The distant thunder of helicopter rotors. Air support was arriving early. Maria keyed her radio. Air support. This is Ridge Watch. I am on Devil's Ridge, approximately 800 meters north of the target zone. Multiple hostiles are assaulting my position and reinforcing the attack on my unit. Ridge Watch. This is Viper Flight. We have visual on your position. Can you mark hostile locations? Maria popped up long enough to spot the approaching mercenaries, then ducked back as bullets sparked around her. Hostiles are climbing the north face of the ridge toward my position. Estimate 4 to 5 combatants within 100 meters of my location. Copy that. Keep your head down, Ridgewatch. We're making our run. The Apache gunships came in low and fast, their chain guns chattering. Maria pressed herself against the rocks as 30mm rounds tore into the hillside below her position. The mercenaries' assault dissolved under the withering fire from above. But Viper Flight wasn't done. The helicopters swung toward town where the reinforcements were trying to regroup. Ridgewatch, this is Viper Lead. We count 15 to 20 hostiles in the target zone. Are there any friendly forces in the town? Negative, Viper Lead. All friendlies are on the south side of town in defensive positions. The town is clear for engagement. Roger. Beginning attack run. Maria watched from her elevated position as the Apache helicopters systematically dismantled the mercenary force. Hellfire missiles turned their vehicles into burning wrecks. Chain gun fire swept their positions. Within minutes, the coordinated attack had become a rout. The surviving mercenaries scattered, some trying to escape on foot across the desert. But more helicopters were arriving, troop transports bringing fresh soldiers to secure the area. Maria's radio buzzed. Ridgewatch, this is Lieutenant Davis. Are you okay up there? She looked around at the bullet-scarred rocks, the empty rifle, the scattered equipment. Her uniform was torn, her face was cut from rock fragments, and she was pretty sure she'd used up about 7 of her 9 lives. I'm alive, sir. Position is secure. Roger. Stay put. We're sending a team to extract you. Maria sat back against a boulder and tried to process what had just happened. A routine training exercise had turned into a full-scale battle. Professional mercenaries had somehow known their every move, their positions, their timing. Someone had set them up. But who? And why? The extraction team reached her position 20 minutes later. Staff Sergeant Williams led the group, carrying medical supplies and looking genuinely concerned. "Jesus, Maria, you look like hell." "Feel worse than I look." She accepted, his hand up and shouldered her empty rifle. "What's the casualty report?" "Morrison's stable. Flesh wound, but he lost some blood. Jensen's shoulder is busted up, but he'll recover. No fatalities on our side." "And the hostiles?" Williams looked grim. 18 confirmed dead, 5 wounded and captured. 3 escaped into the desert, but we'll get them. 21 professional soldiers eliminated by a single sniper with 40. Rounds of ammunition and a training exercise that had gone completely sideways. As they made their way down the ridge, Williams asked the question that was bothering everyone. "How did they know, Maria? How did they know exactly where we'd be and when?" "I don't know, but somebody's going to find out." At the bottom of the ridge, Colonel Martinez was waiting with a field command post and more questions than Maria had answers for. "Staff Sergeant Gonzalez, I need a complete debrief. Start from the beginning and don't leave anything out." Maria gave her report in precise military language. The initial observation of hostile forces, the failure of her unit to respond to intelligence reports, her decision to engage without authorization, the running battle that had lasted over an hour. "Sergeant, you disobeyed direct orders when you opened fire." "Yes, sir. I assessed the situation as an immediate threat to friendly forces and took action to neutralize that threat." "You could face court-martial for firing without authorization." Maria met his gaze steadily. "Yes, sir. But my soldiers are alive." "Colonel," Martinez studied her for a long moment. Around them, investigators were beginning to process the scene, collecting weapons and interviewing the captured mercenaries. "Sergeant, do you have any idea who these people are or why they targeted your unit?" "No, sir, but they had detailed intelligence about our operation. Someone told them where we'd be." The implications hung in the air like smoke from the burning vehicles. If someone had leaked their training schedule, their positions, their standard operating procedures, then this wasn't just a random attack, it was betrayal from within. Colonel Martinez nodded grimly. "We'll get to the bottom of this. In the meantime, you and your unit are restricted to base pending a full investigation." As they loaded into the helicopters for the flight back to Fort Brennan, Maria caught Lieutenant Davis looking at her with something she'd never seen before: respect. "Maria," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology. We all do." "Just doing my job, sir." "No, you were doing our jobs, all of us." He paused. "If you hadn't been watching from that ridge..." Maria looked out the helicopter window at the desert below. Somewhere out there, 3 mercenaries were still running. And somewhere, the person who had betrayed them was probably planning their next move. This wasn't over, not by a long shot, but, for the first time in months, Maria felt like she was part of the team again, even if that team had nearly gotten her killed. The crack of the rifle echoed across the valley like thunder. Maria watched in horror as one of her soldiers, Private Morrison, spun and fell near the bank's entrance. Even from 800 yards away, she could see the spray of blood. Chaos erupted below. Soldiers dove for cover, shouting orders that conflicted with other orders. The careful formation dissolved into panic as men tried to figure out where the shot had come from. Maria was already moving, her rifle trained on the water tower. Through her scope, she could see the first shooter reloading while his partner swept the area with binoculars. They were professionals, not some random militia group. She keyed her radio, knowing they'd probably ignore her again. "Base, we are under attack. Hostile sniper fire from the water tower. One man down. I am engaging." "Ridgewatch, do not fire, do not fire." Lieutenant Davis's voice cracked with stress. "We don't have authorization for live rounds." "Sir, they're shooting our people." Another shot from the tower. This time, Corporal Jensen stumbled backward, clutching his shoulder. The soldiers below were pinned down, caught in the open with minimal cover. Maria didn't wait for permission. She centered her crosshairs on the first shooter's chest and squeezed the trigger. The recoil kicked against her shoulder. Through the scope, she saw the man jerk and fall backward into the tower's shadows. One down. His partner immediately swung his rifle toward Maria's position on the ridge. She rolled to her left just as his bullet whined past her head and sparked off the rocks behind her. "Ridgewatch is under fire," she reported, crawling to a new position. "Confirm one hostile down, one still active in the water tower." The radio erupted with overlapping voices. Lieutenant Davis trying to regain control, Sergeant Cole demanding to know who authorized live fire, medics calling for evacuation routes. In all the confusion, Maria caught fragments of the truth. Not part of the exercise. Real ammunition. How? Did they know our position? The second shooter in the tower had gone quiet, probably repositioning. Maria swept the area with her scope, looking for movement. The soldiers below were dragging Morrison and Jensen to cover behind the convoy vehicles. That's when she saw them. Movement in 3 different buildings around the town square. Muzzle flashes from windows. The water tower sniper hadn't been alone. He'd been the spotter for a coordinated ambush. "Multiple hostiles!" Maria shouted into her radio. "Buildings surrounding the square. At least 6 shooters. This is a coordinated attack." For a moment, the radio went silent. Then, Lieutenant Davis's voice, steady now with the authority of command decision, "Ridgewatch, you have authorization to engage. Provide overwatch and suppress hostile fire." Finally. Maria shifted position again and began methodically engaging targets. A shooter in the hardware store window. 1 shot, down. Another in the diner across the street. 2 shots to penetrate. The glass, target neutralized. Her rifle cracked steadily as she worked through the threat zones. Years of training and combat experience took over. Breathe, aim, squeeze, assess. Move to next target. The soldiers below began to rally. With the immediate sniper threat reduced, they could move and return fire. Staff Sergeant Williams organized a flanking maneuver while Corporal Hayes established a base of fire, but Maria could see what they couldn't from their ground-level position. More movement on the edges of town. Vehicles approaching from the north. Not military vehicles, but civilian trucks and SUVs. Base, we have additional contacts approaching from the north. At least 4 vehicles. Unknown number of personnel. "How many hostiles are we dealing with?" Davis asked. Maria did a quick count based on what she could observe. "Conservative estimate, 20 to 30 hostiles. This is larger than a random attack. Someone planned this." The implications hit everyone at the same time. Their training. Exercise had been compromised. Someone had known exactly when and where they'd be conducting operations. The first truck reached the edge of town and armed men poured out. Not random militia. These moved like trained soldiers. They wore mixed camouflage patterns and carried equipment that looked suspiciously like military surplus. Maria recognized the signs of a professional mercenary unit. She keyed her radio to the emergency frequency, bypassing the local command structure. Any station, this is Staff Sergeant Gonzalez, 142nd Infantry, Fort Brennan. We are under attack by unknown hostiles at Copper Falls, Arizona. Estimate 30-plus enemy combatants with military-grade equipment. Request immediate backup and medical evacuation. The response came from Fort Brennan's main communications center. Staff Sergeant Gonzalez, this is Brennan Control. Confirm you are under attack during training exercise? Affirmative, Brennan Control. This is not a drill. We have wounded soldiers and are outnumbered 3-1. Roger. Help is on the way. ETA 20 minutes for air support. 20 minutes. Maria looked down at the developing battle and wondered if they had 20 minutes. The mercenaries were professional, but they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd planned for fighting soldiers at ground level. They hadn't accounted for a marksman with high ground and clear sight lines. Maria began targeting their leaders first, the ones coordinating movement and giving orders. Each shot disrupted their formations, forced them to take cover, bought precious time for her unit. But she was running low on ammunition, 40 rounds total, and she'd already expended 15. She had to make every shot count. The water tower sniper was moving again. Maria could see him repositioning to get a shot at the soldiers regrouping behind the convoy. She adjusted her scope for the 800-yard shot and waited for a clear target. There, a flash of movement behind the tower's steel framework. Maria led the target slightly, compensating for wind and distance, and fired. The shooter tumbled from the platform and hit the ground with an impact that was audible even at her distance. Water tower neutralized, she reported. But the mercenaries on the ground were adapting. Some of them had spotted her muzzle flashes and were beginning to direct fire toward the ridge. Bullets whined overhead and sparked off the rocks around. Her position. Maria was forced to move again, farther back from her original overwatch position. From here, her sight lines weren't as clear, but she was harder to target. Through her scope, she watched Lieutenant Davis organizing a fighting withdrawal toward better defensive positions. It was the right tactical decision. They were outnumbered and caught in unfavorable terrain, but the wounded soldiers slowed their movement. Morrison was unconscious, being carried by 2 soldiers. Jensen could move but needed support. The mercenaries sensed weakness and pressed their attack. Maria found herself in an impossible position. She could cover the withdrawal, but that would mean letting the enemy get closer to her isolated position, or she could relocate to safety but leave her unit exposed. There was really no choice at all. She settled into a new firing position with clear sight lines to the withdrawal route and began engaging targets with systematic precision. 1 shot, 1 kill, just like the instructors had drilled into her at sniper school. The mercenaries took cover, their advance stalling as Maria's rifle picked off anyone who tried to move in the open. But she was drawing their attention, and return fire intensified around her position. A bullet shattered rock 6 inches from her head. Another punched through her pack, destroying her water bottles. They were getting the range. "Ridge watch. What's your status?" Lieutenant Davis called. Maria chambered another round and acquired a new target. "Still in position, still fighting, but I'm taking heavy fire and running low on ammo. Can you move to a safer position?" She could, but if she moved, her unit would be exposed during their most vulnerable moment, crossing open ground to reach defensive positions in the foothills. "Negative, sir. I can cover your withdrawal from here." Silence on the radio. Then, "Ridge watch. Maria, you don't have to—" "Yes, sir. I do. Because that's what soldiers did. They covered their brothers and sisters, even when those same people had dismissed them, ignored them, treated them as less than equal, especially then. Maria settled in for the fight of her life,